It's the truth about parenting.
Something needs to be real for us.
The truth is in the raw things that people don't talk about. This journey is not for the weak. Welcome to the Mama Jac podcast. Hi, Tia. How are you today?
I am doing so well. I am very excited to be on the Mama Jac podcast.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being on here. So we are going to talk about your pregnancy today, right? And maybe a little bit after also some postpartum. So can you tell me a little bit about that? What was going on? How did pregnancy and postpartum look for you?
Yes. So I think it's important to back up a little bit and start with just my year of 2021 in general. I found out I was pregnant at the end of 2021. So to start off, I was in a relationship. Me and my then boyfriend got engaged around April of 2021, and we ended up getting married really fast. We got married August of 2021. And we just knew exactly what we wanted, and we got married so fast because we had actually previously dated in high school. So it was 8 years after high school, we started dating and got married, and things felt very aligned in my life, I would say. I felt like things were predictable. I knew exactly where I was heading in my career, or where I wanted to be headed in a career, where I wanted to be headed personally in my family life as well. But just 6 weeks after I got married, my life absolutely shattered. It changed for the worst. My sister died on October 3rd of 2021, 6 short weeks after we got married. And I have troubles even just describing the anguish. It's still very real and palpable in my body. I can feel the shakes coming through me, and I'm a lot more stable about talking about it now. I kind of just go into this more of a numb, monotone way of talking about it just through my healing. And that was October 3rd that she died, and she's my person. We were only 2 years apart, 2.5 years apart, and she had been a mom of 2 kids. At the time, they were 3.5 and 10 months old. And I was trying to figure out at that time after she died, like how I could possibly show up for them still, how I could show up for my parents, how I could figure out how to be a wife, because that was still very new to me at that period of time. I had to figure out how to live life again and truly mean it, because I didn't want to be living life without her. I didn't know how to. She was my older sister, so she was there since the day I was born, and I assumed that we were going to be really old together, right? I assumed that we had this whole time in front of us, and that was ripped out from underneath me. I was extremely lost. I was moving into a new house 4 short weeks after her death, and people in society love to focus on the positive stuff and focus on my marriage and focus on the new house and tell me like, oh, congratulations, and assume emotions for you and be like, you must be so happy that these things are happening in your life, right? And I remember just wanting to shake these people and be like, are you serious? There's nothing happy about anything in my life right now. Like, my person has died, and you are expecting me to feel these things that I don't feel. And I felt very confused and very alone and lost. I didn't know how to live the life that I knew I desired, but I knew that I had to keep trying for the people in my life. I knew I had to do it for my niece and my nephew, my parents, because at the time I didn't have the desire to do it for myself yet. And I really focused on them. I tried to focus on my husband and our marriage and do what I can to realign myself with what felt normal or what felt comfortable and predictable. And in reality, like, nothing felt comfortable, nothing felt predictable. I was just shown how unpredictable life truly is, because it was a very traumatic and unexpected death. It wasn't something that anybody was ready for. And then it was exactly 11 weeks after her death that I found out I was pregnant. So this was December 19th, right before Christmas time. Another brand new thing I had to try to figure out how to live with. And I'm really careful about saying how to live with this, because I know how many people desire to be pregnant, desire to become moms, and can't do that. I have very close people in my life who are struggling with infertility, and I felt so guilty on top of feeling scared and just fearful and worried and anxious and depressed and all of this stuff, and nothing aligned with the joyous part that I assumed I would feel when it was time for me and my husband to grow our family. And so pregnancy was a surprise. I can now see how perfectly aligned the divine timing was for our pregnancy, because it gave me another really big reason to show up for myself. I not only got to take care of my body again in the ways that I felt aligned with, but I got to take care of this tiny growing human and this new soul that's going to come join our family. And that gave me a whole new level of purpose and struggle at the same time. The pressure to have that joyous experience of growing our family felt, again, extremely out of alignment with where I was at. I was honestly still really miserable, and the grief was real. I was struggling to process another life change. I felt that I had to heal my grief before the baby was born. And so I put a lot of pressure on myself during that pregnancy that I didn't need to, but I didn't know how not to. Like, it was in my mind, I was like, I have to heal or I'm not going to be the mom that I've always desired to be. And I can now see how untrue that is. But in the first trimester, especially, that felt excruciatingly important to me. And that really brought down my mental health and emotional health even more so than just the first trimester in general, that is already so hard. I know that that is such a common mental struggle and emotional struggle time period for people who become pregnant. And I think that the pressure I was putting on myself again to heal at this unrealistic timeline made it so much harder. And I got the opportunity to slow down. I felt pregnancy was opportunity to slow down and refocus on myself, refocus on the pregnancy. And it took me a couple months to actually do that, to actually step back in my career. I was still working a full-time corporate job on top of health coaching and podcasting and trying to show up for my niece and nephew as much as possible and my parents and all of this stuff that I was trying to hold space for while completely ignoring my own needs. And I think for many people can relate to the fact that pregnancy forces you to focus on your own needs, to tune into your body and really figure out, how can I nourish myself, this baby? How can I prepare as much as I can? We can't prepare for everything, I learned. And I really kept focusing on this how part of life. Like, I kept doing and fixating on the how am I going to survive without my sister? How am I going to live the rest of my life without her? I have this deep knowing that I'm going to live a really long life. And I honestly hated that knowing at that time, because I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to do this without her. I'm ready to go whenever now. And I had to change my mind, because how am I going to show up as a mom? How am I going to heal myself before the baby arrives? Like, I was reaching for certainty and grasping on to every little sliver of it I could possibly feel somewhat stable on the outside of me. And at this time, I realized that things had to change, because prior to getting pregnant, I went through some big life changes of my choosing. And to get through those, I remembered I had to focus on inward, going in. And so I was like, okay, Tia, you've gone through nothing as hard as this, but you've gone through stuff that you didn't know that you were going to make out on the other side of it. So you can get through this. How did you do that? And I had to go back to those basics of slowing down, going inward, and become truly present. So I stepped back in my pursuits career-wise. I stopped trying to show up as okay when I wasn't. I cleared time to practice meditation again, to move my body and make that a priority for my mental health. I started to feed myself in the ways that I knew were best for me, which was a challenge during pregnancy because I didn't know exactly how to do that. But I knew how to take care of myself. Yes, the cravings, the nausea, I wasn't sure how to do any of that, which really propelled me in, after pregnancy, pursuing a professional prenatal postpartum nutrition certification, because I felt so alone in that part. Like, I went to my doctors, I went to the midwife and be like, okay, what do I need to eat? And it was so vague that really, again, propelled me to pursue it outside of, once I was done being pregnant and wanting to help other moms find that out for them. And in that pursuit of going inward and trying to find out, like, how do I do this for me? How do I rebuild a new life? Because it's not the same as it was before her death. It will never be the same. How do I accept that and rebuild this new version of me in life that felt realigned, that I wanted to wake up in the mornings, that I wanted to get out of bed again, that I wanted to put my feet on the ground and do anything, walk and get the mail, do anything.
Probably, right?
Yes,
I'm
and
sure
not feel that.
Got a lot of guilt.
So much guilt of like, oh my gosh, I'm moving on, right? I think that that's such a narrative that society wants you to move on after somebody dies. Move on with your life and keep living because that's what they would want you to do. I hated hearing that.
Oh my God, yeah. That's very dismissive. It's very dismississive. And I could imagine you're supposed to be happy about all these things. So I can imagine now, reflecting back, it's almost like you miss your sister. Of course, you want her to be here, right? Which I believe she's around you all the time in my personal beliefs. Maybe not physically, but maybe even a little more so than she was physically. But beyond that, it's like almost, did you have a sense of like kind of anger towards that and then guilt about the anger towards that? Because it's like, you're moving, yay, you're pregnant, yay, but you weren't allowed. Like, it's almost like when you're grieving, it's like this dark cloud that's like, don't feel good. You can't feel good. Like, why would you feel good? That's so selfish. Like, your sister's not here anymore. How dare you? So it was like a layer of this. And then I'm sure looking back on it now, it's like, dang, these all should have been so many happy things. And it's an uncontrollable circumstance. And you love her so much. I can't imagine the lost feeling you must have had as well.
Yes, it was my push to live up to society's move on narrative layered on so much more to the grief, layered on so much more that it really did. It angered me. It pissed me off that I had to show up in public and just like be a person in public. Like, that didn't make sense to me. I was like, I don't know how to be here. I don't know how to have a conversation with somebody, because I just was staring at them and all that was going through my mind is, my sister's dead. She's dead. And like, that's all I could think about. And then getting pregnant, I had a whole mess of things to think about too on top of that. And it wasn't until I realized like I'm never going to move on, but I can move forward. And accepting the moving forward part of grief freed up the space to feel all the layers of the emotions that I was feeling without putting the pressure of judging those as good or bad, or trying to show up in certain spaces as okay and put on the social mask that feels normal for everyone else to see. Because I noticed it's so much harder for the people around me to see me going through this than it was for me to actually go through it. And growing up, I was conditioned to believe certain feelings were good, certain ones were bad, certain ones you have in your own isolated space. And once you're done having them, you come back out and join the world. You join the family, you join the social circumstance. And so I did not want to leave my house. I just wanted to hibernate and cocoon under my blankets. And I don't think that I actually moved on from that desire of staying in bed all the time until I gave birth and I had to get up, right? Like I had another human's needs to meet that required me to get out of bed.
Yeah.
And recognizing that that's okay. Like I spent a lot of time in bed. I spent a majority of my time crying, and I didn't leave my house. I didn't go on social settings. Every relationship in my life had changed in that time, not only from just becoming pregnant and other friends who weren't having babies and not living a certain lifestyle, I guess that's concurrent to that. But on top of that, people not understanding that it wasn't personal, that I didn't want to see them or that I couldn't show up for them during the stuff that they were going through, and releasing the guilt off of that from myself too, like giving myself the grace of the right people are going to stay in my life and they're going to show up. And honestly, unexpected people showed up and gave me that grace and gave me the love and connection to remind me that I still belonged just as I am, which wasn't something that clicked in me until probably recently, honestly. Like I feel like the shifts that I've gone through in the last 2 years and 3 months have been so unlinear. It's crazy. I feel like I'm the type of person who's like, okay, we're starting here. It's always going to go up. It's always going to go up. Things are only going to get better. And there's so many twists and turns, ups and downs. There's so much of that in pregnancy and grief and parenting and marriages and any relationship. And I think my experience of having pretty much everything change in my life in a 4-month span has allowed me to surrender to that knowing more, and has allowed me to show up and just embrace what is without labeling things as good and bad, and without trying to put the external pressure on myself of living up to society's expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's great. It seems like you've come a long way, and I'm sure it's still a fight every day. Grief doesn't have a timeline, right?
No.
It doesn't have a timeline,
or a roadmap.
Yep. And everybody goes through it different. And you're allowed to feel however you feel. But I can totally see how you felt like your pregnancy was the push you needed, right? Because you were feeling all of these down things. You couldn't get out of bed. You couldn't do this. And it forced you to show up for yourself. And there is nothing as grounding and as humbling as having a baby. Like nothing. Like the whole process from like being pregnant to giving birth to them being a newborn, it's very eye-opening, and that changes you forever. So my goodness, you had to go through so much. You might have been in a lot of pain, but you knew what your body needed to feel that. That is so healthy. It might not seem healthy, but that's just the way you had to be to survive.
Right. I I definitely want to make it known, like, I do not feel like I'm coming from a place of like the champion story, right? Like, I don't feel like I've made it and now I'm like telling you how to do it. Cause honestly,
Yeah.
like you said, this is not linear.
Mm.
This is the end of January, like October, November, December. October is the anniversary of the death. November's like the beginning of the holiday season. And those months were really hard for me. I had just to do the bare minimum to show up for myself and refocus on whatever is going to get me through the day, the easiest or the best. And reminding myself of giving myself the grace, because before my sister died, like if this would have happened to me 10 years ago, I would not have survived. There is no doubt in my mind, because I was in such an unhealthy place, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Unhealthy. I was not surrounding myself with the right people. I was engaging in all the wrong habits. I could not care less about my body physically, like feeding it right, moving it, any of that stuff, beyond just wanting to be skinny and tiny. And if I would have stayed in that kind of mentality and spirituality and totally numbing and ignoring all of my emotions, there's no way I would have survived. I would have turned to alcohol and drugs so easy. So easy. Like, it's so tempting, because there's a narrative out there of like, this will help you. This will help you get you through. And no one's going to judge you for it, because it's so widely accepted to just have a glass of wine at the end of the day, or have a bottle of wine at the end of the day. And it wasn't until I really focused on like my holistic nutrition, my holistic health and lifestyle in general, that I made a bunch of changes. And I had to go back to the very beginning of how did I actually make those changes to get to where I was at and start over after her death, because it wasn't a linear process. It was really hard. And my whole philosophy is to do it from a heart-centered place, to give yourself love while you're making changes, because I tried to hate myself into change and it just doesn't work. I've been down that path. And so I really had to remind myself of that during pregnancy, and to sit with my emotions and to remind myself that anything and everything I feel is not a problem to be fixed. I don't need to figure out how to get through this sadness. I don't need to figure out how to get through this anger or anything that comes up. I just need to sit with it, feel it in my body, let it vibrate through my soul, and it will too pass. When it's really dark and when it's hard and when the emotions are labeled bad in society, it's so easy. I still do this. I reach for the, how am I going to snap out of this? How am I going to fix this? But it's not a problem to be fixed. And I had to really remind myself of that. And I really feel I don't wish anybody to go through what I've gone through. And I can definitely see how my sister's death has brought me into a place where I am as a parent. I really feel like I could have gotten here in some better ways, of course, and I wouldn't want myself to go through this ever again. And I still, to this day, like I feel physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually the best I ever have in my life. I feel so aligned with who I am. I feel like I'm actually showing up as a mother that I'm proud of, and that I'm finally stepping into making decisions for me and for my family, even when they don't align with the culture or society's expectations around me. And I don't think I would have been able to do that before. I think I would have easily fallen into the traps around me a lot easier.
Yeah. And you were put into a situation where it's kind of like, what do I have to lose? These are my true colors. Here they are. Deal with them or don't. But either way,
Right.
I'm still going. Like, I have to, and I know you say you don't want to be a hero story, but you just changing that around and realizing that about you, like, I want you to realize that is huge. And a lot of people would turn to drugs, would turn to alcohol, would turn to all of these bad things. And you made the choices not to do that. And you made the choice to say to yourself, okay, how do I do this again? Those were your choices, right? You put yourself there, and that's something to be very proud of. Like very, 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 I just need to highlight that for you, because I don't know if you know like how big of a deal that is, because a lot of people can't pick themselves up like that. And I know, I'm sorry if me saying like pick yourself back up, because I know it's probably still a fresh wound for you even to this day. So, you know, it's just everybody grieves different. And I feel like you just need to give yourself grace and know that every day is different. I know that sounds like it's everywhere, but literally every day is different. And that even with parenting, every day is different. With having a kid, every day is different. With having a marriage, every day is different. So when you add that stuff on top of it, I can imagine there's a whole other layer. But your story is very powerful. I just don't want you to dismiss how powerful you are as a person getting through this and going through this. Actually, I'm going to replace my words, going through this, because like I said, a lot of people would not have had that. What do I do? They would have been like, how do I numb this? Because I can't feel it anymore. So I have to give you so much credit for that. I don't know if anyone else has ever told you that, but girl, come on. Like, you're on here talking to a lot of people about this. You know what I mean? This is going to help a lot of people's journey that were in a similar situation to you. And it's beautiful that you can share it. And thank you so much for sharing all of this with us, with me, with my community. Grief is not easy to talk about. It really isn't.
No, it's not. I really appreciate you saying that. I know that there's still this fear in me if I only present the, oh, look what I've done story, that maybe people aren't going to see that I still live with it. And I appreciate you changing that to the going through it, because that feels really aligned with me. Like, I am still going through it. And in pregnancy, I was looking for stories like this. I was trying to find other grieving siblings who found out they were pregnant after, and how to live through that bereavement. And I really didn't find much out there that aligned with my story. I found a lot of grief with pregnancies, but it was typically other pregnancy loss with grief, which so hard. I don't want to diminish that challenge as by any means. And I wanted to find something that was with my story of grieving my best friend, my sister, my person. It was only her and I growing up. So now I'm the only child. I have so many fears about, like, well, my parents are going to go to old, and then it's just me and all of that stuff. And I didn't have an outlet to communicate with people. And so I just decided to start sharing my story and have hope and trust in the universe that the people that also resonate with it are going to come find me by me talking about it. And there are a few close people that I've never met, but I feel so close to online, because they have similar stories and can relate to the sibling loss. Because I've read a lot of books out there on grief, and there's a lot of spouse loss, children loss, parent loss, but there's not a whole lot about sibling loss. And I wanted to shed some light into that, because I know that it's unfortunately more common than we think. And I also know that no matter where you're at in your life, and if you're a human who enjoys other humans, grief is inevitable. We're all going to experience it. It's a universal thing. And the more we talk about it, the more support and love and connection we can find with other people who I think also need that support and love and connection.
Yeah. And healing. There's a huge healing aspect with that as well. Just talking about it, getting it out there, it can be very healing.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard not to go into spiritual talk with you right now. I just want to go for it because I'm such a spiritual person. we could talk about that on the side, but I just wanted
Okay.
to thank you so much for sharing your story and being so vulnerable and brave, right? Because your words are probably helping somebody as we speak right now. They're listening and they're just like, wow, like that's how I do it. That's how I get myself up. Or there's just one little thing that you said and they're like, okay, I can do this now. And it's going to hold a lot of power. I know it is.
So when I found out I was pregnant, my whole thing is to research, and try to plan everything out. Like, how am I going to get through this so I don't fall into whatever? And postpartum depression and anxiety was like top of mind for me because I am somebody who's already struggled in the past with depression and anxiety. And so I was like, okay, postpartum, like it's going to happen to me. So how am I going to get through this? I did as much research as I could, and I landed on first way I can set myself up for postpartum is an unmedicated birth and trying to figure that stuff out. And I really believe going through the grief and surviving each day I survived up until that point with my sister's death, I knew that I could physically go through anything, any pain, any of that I could physically get through. So I was like, okay, done. We're doing an unmedicated birth. And then with my training of postpartum too, I learned about as much as I could about supplements and actually nourishing my body with the food I was eating. I did not plan ahead enough with the food I was eating. If I have more children, that's definitely something I'm going to better plan, is having more freezer meals for that. But I did what I could, and I felt pretty good about that. I felt like in general, after he was born, I was like, I'm doing this. Like, I got this. I can't believe it. I actually enjoy this. I love being home with him. I love being a mom. I felt really good. And then the death of my sister's, like the first anniversary of her death was about 4 weeks after he was born, 5 weeks after he was born. And it was that same week I realized that I had prolapse. So I was experiencing, just reliving that first week of her death. I was realizing my bladder was falling out of my body. I felt like my body had betrayed me because I did everything I could with unmedicated birth. I saw a pelvic floor physical therapist before he was born. I was listening to my body and moving around in ways that I felt ready for, and this still happened. So I felt very betrayed by my body, and overcoming that took a long time. It wasn't until I really connected the emotional and spiritual aspects of prolapse that I felt healing happening in my body, mentally and physically. And I started moving forward with physical therapy again. I connected with people online who also experienced this, which I was shocked at how many people actually do experience this after birth, no matter the type of birth it was, no matter the preparation they had before. It just happens, and it's nothing that you did to yourself. And so reminding myself of that every day was very helpful. And then he did pretty good for sleep wise. Like, we were getting like 4 to 6 hour stretches regularly, which felt really good up until that 4 months.
Yeah.
And then that 4 months hit and he was up every 2 hours, if not more. And I was like, what the heck? How am I going to do this? My husband's working full time. He actually started a new job immediately after he was born. So he was working 10, 12-hour days, 6 days a week sometimes. So it was just me at home, and I was trying to find a community, right? So I was joining these different mom groups in my local area. And one day I came home, I was backing into our driveway like I do every day. And somehow I backed into my husband's truck. And that was devastating. I cried so much, and he was fine with it. He's like, it's just a car. But mind you, this was like his dream truck that he had just bought in 2 months before I backed into it. And so I was just like, I'm so sorry. That was kind of a breaking point, though, that I needed, because that's what really set me into realizing that I need to go back to the basics again, put my needs first. Yes, I'm going to meet these babies' needs, and I can only meet those babies' needs if I meet mine. And so
Yeah.
I rejoined the gym. We rebudgeted because our gym membership that I love is not cheap. But we made it a priority. We rebudgeted some stuff, and I've been going ever since that like 5-month mark. And that is, I feel, how I've gotten through the obsessive thoughts, the overwhelming anxiety, the sleepless nights, the up and downs with sleep, because he's 16 months old. He doesn't sleep through the night every night. And that's okay with me. I knew I didn't want to do sleep training. I knew that wouldn't align with me. Hearing him cry, that actually was harder on me than just waking up and holding him or learning how to co-sleep. And really doing stuff significantly different than the ways my family has done stuff traditionally. And that's been another challenge as well to get through and not feel the pressure of.
They just anything they don't care. They're just going to tell you, oh, why are you doing that? What? Are you sure? That's not how we did it. Like, oh, just give them this. Just do this. And you're like, oh my God, you did that to me? Like,
yes, I think it's so, I didn't know that this was going to happen, but there is something about becoming a parent, learning how to parent a tiny little human and reparent yourself, that is so healing and really freaking hard. I am very grateful that like when my sister died, I immediately got into therapy that following week. And I've seen that therapist every week or bi-weekly since then. I have not stopped. And that was part of my postpartum plan, was weekly therapy, no matter what, like you need to do this. And then I got back into the gym. So like daily movement, moving my body every single day, not for the way I look physically, not to bounce back, because there's no bouncing back physically, but to come and be more mentally and emotionally stable throughout the day and at 4 a.m.
Yeah, of course, right? I'm a super early riser. I wake up at like 5. I try to wake up at 5 every day to get all of my stuff done before the kids wake up, because once they're up, that's not happening. So I can find little windows here and there, but it's not very often.
It's hard.
So postpartum, you were able to work through that. So you didn't have any super bad episodes. You were able to kind of balance that with your diet and working out. And that's incredible. That's incredible. And you are so right about the food, even being pregnant. Because I remember with my first, I was super, all these veggies, all these, like, I was building my body, right? Because at the time I had my training. Well, I was going through my training certification. So I had like this much knowledge on nutrition, but I knew enough, right? So I was putting all the good stuff into my body and everything with him. And afterwards, like still doing the same thing, but my postpartum still was like, I actually learned that I was on progesterone because I was fully effaced at 32 weeks. And a lot of women that come off of progesterone, it's something that you're supposed to taper off of, and they don't tell you that. So you have the baby and you go off of your progesterone and poof. And I was on it with both of my pregnancies. So now I'm thinking like that possibly had something to do with the horrible postpartum depression I had, because oh my God, mine was really bad. No, there was no food, working out. I tried it all, right? I tried it all, and it was just not going through for me. So I think it's great that you were able to do that. And that's what you do now, right? For prenatal and postpartum, like food, thinking about health. You're on the nutrition side mostly, right?
Right. I definitely want to. That is so good that you recognize that in your body. And also, I fully believe that there is a time and place for medication, and postpartum depression is the time and is the place for medication when you need to, on top of doing those things of like, right, the food, the nutrition, the movement, all those things. But sometimes you can't get to that point without that help. And like that help is 100% okay and needed, and the right thing to do for many people in that circumstance. I can imagine. It is a tool. It's one of the tools. Yes.
Yeah. And then, that helps. And then you can start focusing on everything because your brain isn't like a tornado, you know? That's what I always say. My brain was like a tornado. So much stuff was happening. Okay, so is there anything else you want to talk about your personal journey?
I think we covered most of it. I am more than happy to answer any questions and connect with anybody that is going through it. I don't have answers for you. I don't have the roadmap for you, unfortunately. And I'm really good at listening, and I'm really good at just validating and being a support when needed. Nutritionally, I do have some answers there. I feel pretty confident in that. And I also just really appreciate that you have opened up this space and made it a safe place to be honest and recap as much as I could in the last 45 minutes.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. It truly was.
Welcome to the end of another episode of the Mama Jac Real Raw Parenting Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Remember, parenting is a journey filled with ups and downs, and it's okay to make mistakes along the way. The Mama Jac Podcast is here to provide you with support, guidance, and real-life stories from fellow parents who are navigating the challenges of raising children. If you have any questions, topics you'd like me to cover, or stories you'd like to share, please reach out to me. I love hearing from my listeners and incorporating your experiences into future episodes. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Podpage, all under the Mama Jac, TheMamaJac. Thank you for tuning in. Remember, you're not alone in this journey, and together we can create a supportive community of real, raw parents. Stay tuned for more episodes filled with laughter, tears, and everything in between. Until next time, keep being the amazing parent that you are.